Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Facebook Live, where we have a privilege tonight to talk with the District 13, hoping to represent the people of District 13 in Illinois, Betsy Londrigan. Betsy, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I want to tell our viewers on Facebook how this is going to kind of work tonight. So for 30 minutes, we'll be talking to Betsy. And you at home, if you're watching this, you have an active role in all of this. If you can submit some questions on the comments section, if you have some questions for Betsy, we will relay those to her throughout this next 30 minutes. But until we get some questions kind of coming into the comments, Betsy, I have some questions that I have formulated to get us kicked off for tonight. So the first is, obviously 2 years ago, you were in this same spot running against Rodney Davis, and you lost by a very narrow margin. Why do you think this year is going to be different?
Well, we spent 2 years really building a foundation. And this time around, I'm not a first-time candidate. We created this amazing volunteer army of over 2,000 volunteers, when I ran during 2018. And we got to bring them with us into the 2020 race. And, we've been able to build on that. And in fact, our volunteer army is absolutely amazing. Over the weekend, they've been, people have been phone banking a lot, trying to reach out to voters. And they made 44,000 calls in one weekend, 48 hours. That's amazing, and I think they've called over 220,000 voters, recently, just trying to spread our message, introduce me to people in every corner of the district if they haven't, met me yet. And so I'm very excited about that. And our race, people saw how close that we came in 2018. So they were excited to finish what we started. And, but I also want to comment on something that is still an issue, and that's healthcare. I mean, that's what got me into the race in the first place. I got into this race to protect the Affordable Care Act.
And we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a moment,
Right.
when we start talking about some of the issues. One thing that people are constantly saying all the time to me is there's so much division in our country. I think that's pretty evident no matter where you look. And we hear this every year from different candidates, or every other year, that there has to be bipartisanship in Washington for anything to get done. So how can you convince people that you would work with those on the other side of the aisle?
Well, I'm born and raised here in Central Illinois. Half my family is Republican, half my friends are Republican. We managed to, have wonderful family dinners and wonderful relationships with our friends, because we know what, when you drill down, what's important to people is, their family, their community, their neighborhood, their state. And some of these issues are really, it cuts across party lines. I want to make sure that every person can get to a doctor when they need to. I want to lower the cost of prescription drugs. I don't want people going bankrupt because of a medical emergency or chronic illness. And it doesn't matter if you, vote red, blue, green, purple. Those are human issues. And I am very proud that for 7.5 years, I worked at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. My whole mission was to strengthen the museum that's dedicated to educating the public about the most, wonderful Republican president, Abraham Lincoln.
How would you?
I was proud to do it.
How would you characterize the state of our country right now?
Well, it is, if you're watching the national media and the national news, it is very divided, and I know that. And, when I am talking to people, and more importantly, when I'm listening to people around the district, it really does come down to the core issues, and that's what we need to get back to. Can people, like I said, can people get to a doctor? Can they afford the prescription drugs? But right now, because of COVID, we are in very, dire straits. I'm hearing from people around the district, Republicans and Democrats, who are trying to figure out if they can pay their mortgage. Are they going to pay their mortgage? Are they going to make their car payment? Are they still going to put groceries in the refrigerator? This is where people are at right now. People want to get back to work. They want to get their kids back in school, but they want to do it safely.
Last week, I had the chance to talk with your opponent, Congressman Davis, and I asked him this question, so I'll have to ask you as well. In this spirit of unity, say something nice about Congressman Davis.
Well, I know that he is a devoted, family man and father. I heard he used to coach his kids in football, and I think that's awesome.
He said tenacity. Your tenacity was what he admired about you, by the way, if you wanted to know.
Thank you.
So we've talked about, with him, some of the political ads that we have seen because they're running all the time. And one of the things that you seem to highlight against Mr. Davis is the PPP and lack of transparency, you call, in where this money is going for businesses. I asked him that question. He said that the bill that that he was against would have been a lack of transparency, given less transparency than what the current CARES Act already offers. What do you say to that?
Well, he actually, he voted against the bill that he's referring to as the Truth Act. And he also voted against forming a House Oversight Committee to oversee the PPP program. So you're talking about more than one thing there. So with the Truth Act, I do think that we need to make sure that we know where the money went. We have seen, we saw abuses. We want to know why the LA Lakers are getting a loan instead of the mom and pop shop across the street, right? So that's the Truth Act. But he also voted against the formation of an oversight committee. And that is a big problem. I think when people have been in Washington a long time, like he has, they forget that this is taxpayer dollars. This is our money, taxpayer money. And we have every right to know where our dollars are going, whether it's $1,000, $1 million, $2 million, taxpayer money. We deserve full transparency, and he voted against it.
Speaking of PPP, there is an ad against Davis which attacks his family receiving PPP for their chain of restaurants that they have. We did a fact check with this, that Davis had no control of getting that money. So is it fair for him to be attacked for that?
I think that what you're referring to is the calling into question why he would vote against transparency. I think that loan had already taken place. It was very early on. Now, I hear from people all around the district who missed out on that first round. And when we ultimately did see where the money went, we saw a lot of abuses by, like I said, Shake Shack, the LA Lakers, some places they did ultimately give that money back. But, we deserve as taxpayers to know, is the money going where it's intended? And we deserve to know, how are they deciding who gets what and when? Because there were a lot of people who did not make it into that first round. By the time they got in line, the money was gone. And, maybe they got it in the second round, maybe they didn't. But I think our mom and pop shops should be the first on the list.
Betsy, we're starting to get some questions from our viewers watching this. And again, if you're just tuning into this, you can chime in the comment section and have a question for Betsy. So this is from Chad Simpson, and I'm just reading this for the first time here. So what are you going to do to help the people of your district with COVID? Do you stand with Governor Pritzker?
So what we have to do, in my opinion, what we have to do with COVID, right, is address people's immediate concerns right now. So what I'm hearing from families around Central Illinois is that we need to provide extended unemployment insurance. We need to make sure our small businesses can get access to more loans, because I do believe that ultimately we'll get to the other side of this pandemic, but we need to make sure that our working families and our small businesses are still afloat. Which brings me then to, Chad, how are we going to get to the other side? What's between here and there? And we actually have a very successful role model to look to. If you follow what the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign has done, they have created their own rapid-based saliva test, their own tracing program, their own protocol. They have their own supply chains. It's really amazing. So as of today, I think they have a website where you can kind of keep up with what they're doing on a daily basis. It's fascinating. They have tested over 550,000 faculty, staff, students, and community members. And their rolling positivity rate is less than 0.25%. That is why students are able to be back on campus, why businesses are able to be reopened. And that is what a plan looks like. What I would like to see us do is to have a national plan like that so that we can get our workers back to work and our students back in the classrooms and our teachers back in the classrooms teaching.
You mentioned not really having a national plan when it comes to testing. Yeah. Who's to blame for that?
Well, I think it starts at the top. I think, like every other American, I was shocked to hear President Trump say that he knew early on, in his own words, that this virus was deadly and that it was airborne. And then, he didn't trust the American public enough, I guess, because he stood in front of us and lied to us about it and had no national plan to address it. I think that's a failure in leadership.
More questions from our viewers watching tonight. This is from Kyle. He says that your husband is a corporate lobbyist. If you're elected, how will you prevent conflicts of interest between your job as a member of Congress and your husband's corporate clients' interest and priorities?
Well, Kyle, what I would respectfully say to you is that it is 2020. And I think that question might be a little bit dated. I think that we're beyond women being judged by our husbands' careers. And I very much look forward to being held accountable for every vote that I take.
This next question comes from Rick. It says, Betsy pledged to repeal the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Says repealing would eliminate these many benefits and raise marginal rates on every American. Why do you support this?
So I think there might be a little misinformation about what that tax bill did. Now this is a bill that Congressman Davis was the face of and that he touted. We kept pushing back and saying this tax bill is really not for working families. This is going to, help the super wealthy people, and the benefits are going to go to corporations. And that is exactly what we have seen as a result. Over 60% of those benefits went to the wealthiest 20%. And we have, it was like a corporate giveaway. Corporations just raked in billions of dollars. For example, pharmaceutical companies, all right? The 5 largest pharmaceutical companies got over $40 billion in tax benefits from that tax giveaway. And I'm against that. I believe that our tax system should benefit the middle class and our working families. And, I just believe that millionaires and billionaires should pay their fair share. Nurses and teachers are paying their fair share. So should millionaires and billionaires.
We're still waiting for more questions from our viewers, but we have a few more. Let's go back to talking about the pandemic impacting everybody. Okay. What letter grade would you give the handling of the pandemic on a national scale right now?
Well, I think that's a more complicated question than a letter grade. I think that what we need is we needed our president, our congressional leaders to come together and to really develop a national plan for testing and for tracing and for helping our people to get through this. And with that, again, that has been a failure in leadership. And look, everybody wants to get our economy reopened. In order to do that, we have to have a national plan for testing and tracing and for COVID protocols so that we can get people back to work. The pandemic, it hit everybody, and it's nobody's fault, right? Workers want to go to work. It's not their fault that they can't go back to work right now. They shouldn't be punished. We as a nation need to pull together and figure this out.
That national plan, does that include, in your eyes, a national mask mandate?
Well, I think we have to follow the science, and let's see what the science says. I'd love to see what a national plan looks like, and I do think we should use University of Illinois or Urbana-Champaign as a role model because they seem to be doing an excellent job.
We have a question from Tom, and I know healthcare is a big part of your platform. You've said that numerous times. So he wants to know, Betsy, we continue to have discussions about the Affordable Care Act. How do we make sure that we protect people from Central Illinois with pre-existing conditions?
Well, we have to make sure that we keep the Affordable Care Act. Tom, thank you for asking the question. That's the whole reason I got into this race, is to protect healthcare. It is a stark contrast between myself and my opponent. My opponent has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act and all of the essential health benefits that go along with it, including voting to gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I believe that's wrong. I believe we should look at the Affordable Care Act as the first step it was intended to be, and we should build on it. And there is an urgency around this issue, a particular urgency right now because of the pandemic, and also because 1 week after Election Day, the Supreme Court is going to hear the case to completely overturn the Affordable Care Act. And that is a case that was supported by this administration and that my opponent voted for multiple times in support of this lawsuit. I think that's wrong. I believe we can do better, we deserve better, and we need to have our health care protected.
The Affordable Care Act, obviously something that the Supreme Court could definitely hear. And you're talking about the new justice that is waiting to be confirmed, possibly, Amy Coney Barrett. Talk about, do you feel like that is being rushed through the process?
Yeah, I think what we have seen is that when the Senate wants to move quickly on something, they can. When it's their priority, they move swiftly. And what I wish they were making our families and our small businesses a priority. I wish that we were seeing this kind of rapid movement on extending unemployment insurance and helping our small business owners and, developing a national plan so we can get people back to work and school.
You just said it moments ago that Congressman Davis has voted 11 times to get rid of pre-existing conditions. He is adamant that the bill that he supported would no way get rid of pre-existing conditions. I questioned him on that last week, but why is he wrong? Why do you think he's wrong on that bill that he supported?
The congressman has been fact-checked on that repeatedly. He brought it up again in the first debate that we had 2 weeks ago. And the next day, WILL, who was a host of the debate, fact-checked him and said, I'm absolutely telling the truth on this, and he is not. He has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act with no replacement, which would gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions. He brought it up again in the last debate, and he got fact-checked again. I can't answer why he is being dishonest with voters, other than he is not proud of his record, because he realizes that it would affect hundreds of thousands of people in Central Illinois and millions of others.
We have another question from our audience watching tonight. This is from Rachel. Says, Betsy, how will you make sure mental health care is covered?
Thank you for asking that, Rachel. That is such an important question. And again, in order for us to make sure that mental health is kept a priority and that it is kept covered, we have to preserve the Affordable Care Act and the essential health benefits that go along with it.
Let's shift gears here with another issue that's been very top of mind as of late over the last several months, and that includes policing. Are you in favor in any way of defunding the police in any form?
I am not in favor of defunding the police. I think that what we saw this summer, 8 minutes and 46 seconds changed the world, changed all of our eyes. And we have to recognize that there is racism that has to be rooted out. We need to look at law enforcement, but if we stop there, then we are really missing the big picture, because we're seeing that systemic injustice in housing and healthcare and education and in small business loans. We have to do better, and that begins by opening our eyes to the problems that have been there and are still there.
Across the country, should police departments be required to equip officers with body cameras or dash cameras in their cruisers?
Well, that's a pretty specific, it's a pretty specific question. I think that local police departments have to, make some of those decisions. We need accountability. That's, most certainly true. Part of the reason we're seeing some of these, some of what's happening is because there are body cameras. But again, there's more that we need to do too. We need to ban chokeholds, but we also need to recognize that, that our officers are not necessarily trained to deal with a mental health crisis or an addiction crisis that they might encounter. So one thing that I have supported and will continue to support, because I talk to sheriffs around Central Illinois, and so many times the citizens that are in their jails are suffering from a form of addiction or a mental health crisis. Let's make sure that we give our law enforcement some addiction counselors and mental health professionals, recognizing that not every 911 call needs an armed response. Sometimes they need more tools in their tool belt. And I think we should provide that, in partnership with the law enforcement officers.
Getting back to some of our viewer comments, this isn't so much a question, but a lot of people in the comment section are bringing up Michael Madigan and relationship with him. He's been around for a long time. How would you classify the nature of that relationship with Michael Madigan in Illinois?
We're both Democrats in Illinois. I really appreciated the fact check that your station did, because I have taken no money from Mike Madigan or from his political committees. I appreciate you calling out Congressman Davis's commercial as false because of that. I am a Democrat running for office in Illinois. And as I have said over and over, I believe that no one is above the law. There are multiple investigations going on right now. And, if whoever is found to be guilty in this bribery scheme needs to step down immediately. Public officials should be held to a higher standard.
Watching our 6 p.m. news and our fact checks. Appreciate that, Betsy. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys standing up for the truth.
Well, this is the next question from Stephen. If elected, and we kind of covered this before, but people are coming and going through this, but says, if elected, how do you plan to work together with members of the other party?
Just like I have worked with, at the university as a teacher, worked at the foundation, because people are people. And I will go out there seeking common ground. And I think that is in healthcare, it's in infrastructure. Come on, infrastructure is something that the president campaigned on all during the 2016 race. And that is something we can agree on, right? We know we need roads and bridges. We need our waterways repaired. We know we need rural broadband. These are things that we can agree on. So let's, find the common ground and let's start that as a building block.
Speaking of spending money and going back to a little bit to the coronavirus, we know trillions of dollars being spent on trying to keep the economy going right now. We have exploding deficits with the national debt. Why does running up big public deficits, it seems like that's not really a focus necessarily so much in Washington. Is this going to be a big problem down the road for our country?
Well, I think, with coronavirus, again, the pandemic, we haven't been through anything like this before. And I think it would be a mistake for us to start, cutting things when what we need to be doing right now is investing in our families and our small businesses that are in very real danger of going under and not, and not being there when we get to the other side of the pandemic. I think we need to be making investments in our people. But when you're talking about, adding to the deficit, that's a question that Congressman Davis should answer, because when they did pass that 2017 tax bill, it added $1.5 trillion to the deficit. And that's not money that was reinvested in families. It wasn't money that was reinvested in small businesses. That was money that, the majority of that, the vast majority of that, went to big corporations and the super wealthy.
But with the deficits and the ongoing money that the government is having to spend, as you said, and rightfully so, to uplift a lot of these businesses during this very tough time, how are we going to pay for it? Do you support raising taxes?
Now, I think that's a let's get to the other side and have that conversation. I honestly don't think that we can address something when we don't know what the final bill is going to be. What I do know is that, like today, I was out working at a food drive over the lunch hour, and there were hundreds of cars lined up around the block while we were putting boxes of food into people's cars. This is where people in Central Illinois are at right now. And if Congress doesn't pull itself together and start getting some help out to our families, we are going to, I fear we're really going to lose them and not be able to, bring them with us to the other side.
Getting another question. This is from Ryan. He says, talk about farmers. Davis has worked for years on this. What will you do to help restore what has disappeared under the president's trade war?
Oh, I love talking about farmers. I was really happy that we were able to introduce folks to my family's farm, which is in Niantic. It's the farm my grandma grew up on and that my cousins still run. So when I've done multiple roundtables with farmers during this time, and there's a couple of things I think we need to address. So when they're talking about the markets, we need to know where the markets are going to come from next. I agree with where the president started in holding China accountable, but it very quickly went off the rails and became an unnecessary trade war. Our soybean and corn farmers have really paid a heavy price. And then in addition to the trade war, we have had, historic flooding due to climate change. And so how are we going to move our farmers forward? Well, we have to make sure that they have markets to sell to, because while this administration has been bickering back and forth with China, Brazil is nipping at our heels. So we need to get that straightened out, and we need to make sure our farmers have markets to sell to. We also need to be making investments in our farmers, because this historic flooding is, this is becoming more commonplace. We need to invest in conservation programs, in our infrastructure, so that our farmers can be prepared for what's coming down the pipe climate-wise.
Got about 2 more minutes here with Betsy. So again, if you at home are watching this and you have a question and you want to sneak in real quick, we'll hopefully get that to Betsy. But let's talk a little bit about social issues, in particular abortion. Roe v. Wade, obviously the law of the country when it comes to abortion. Would you like to see it overturned or expanded? What is your specific views when it comes to abortion?
My specific views are that I trust women. I trust women to make their own decisions about their own bodies without the government interfering. I think we can do just fine on our own.
Betsy, it's almost our time. I always say this at the end of interviews. Anything else that you want to add that I haven't asked?
Well, I want to make sure that people know that I am in this race to protect healthcare. I want to make sure that every person can get to a doctor when they need to, that you can afford your prescription drugs, and that no family goes bankrupt because of a medical emergency or chronic illness. And healthcare is on the ballot. And I am asking for your vote because I want you and I together to protect our healthcare. Thank you.
Betsy Londrigan, thank you so much for your time. Have a good rest of the evening, and thank you to our Facebook viewers who have asked questions and who have tuned in today. All right, thanks, Betsy.
Thanks so much.